Close your eyes and allow the world to soften around you. Let the noise of the day dissolve, like footprints fading from the shore. The room around you is still, the sky outside is silent, and you are here, drifting slowly into a story older than memory itself. Tonight, we journey together to a place that no map can find. A city whispered about for millennia, suspended somewhere between history and dream. Atlantis, a name that echoes with mystery, woven into ancient texts and sunken myths. A land said to have flourished with untold beauty and wisdom, only to vanish beneath the sea in a single night. Is it real? A truth buried beneath centuries of silt and seawater? Or is it merely a parable, a fable conjured to warn us of our own pride? The story of Atlantis has endured not because we are certain of it, but because we are not. Its absence leaves a space that imagination fills, each generation shaping the myth anew. The tale does not begin with a sailor or a soldier or even a storyteller. It begins with a philosopher, Plato, who lived in Athens more than 2,000 years ago. In quiet courtyards, shaded by olive trees, he shared a story he claimed had passed through time. From the temples of Egypt to the scrolls of wise men, a story of a lost civilization, grander than any known, swallowed by the sea as punishment for its arrogance. But Atlantis is more than a warning. It is an invitation, a mystery wrapped in wonder, urging us to peer just beyond the veil of what we know, into the gentle depths of what might have been. And so, as you lie back and breathe in the stillness, let your thoughts wander. Let the rhythm of your breath carry you, like a small boat on a calm ocean, toward the quiet places of the world and the mind. You are safe, you are warm, and you are about to enter a tale that belongs not just to history, but to the human spirit. Our journey begins with the voice that first uttered the name Atlantis, the philosopher whose words have rippled across millennia. Let us begin then with Plato. This is Drift Off to History, where we bring calm stories for curious minds. More than 2,000 years ago, in the shaded gardens of ancient Athens, a man named Plato composed a story that would echo far beyond his time. A philosopher, a student of Socrates, and a teacher of Aristotle, Plato was no mere teller of tales. He was a seeker of truth. Through his writings, he shaped the way the Western world thinks about justice, virtue, and the soul. But nestled among his most thoughtful works is something unexpected, a legend, a tale of a city lost to the sea, a place called Atlantis. He wrote of it in two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, philosophical texts that blend logic with myth, politics with poetry. And in them, he claimed the story was not his own invention. It was, he said, passed down from his ancestor, Solon, a wise and respected lawgiver who had lived some 2 centuries before Plato's time. Solon had travelled far from Greece, across the Mediterranean, to the ancient city of Sais in Egypt, where he sought knowledge from priests known to be keepers of the oldest truths. There, in the still, incense-scented halls of a temple to the goddess Neith, the priests revealed to Solon a story written in sacred texts, preserved for thousands of years. It told of a mighty island nation, far beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. This island, they said, was greater than Libya and Asia combined. Its people were powerful, intelligent, and prosperous. And yet, in the end, it was destroyed in a single day and night of catastrophe, sinking beneath the waves and vanishing forever. Plato took this tale and wove it into his dialogues, using it not merely to entertain, but to instruct. He described Atlantis in vivid, measured detail, its geography, its wealth, its rulers, and its laws. He wanted the reader or the listener to feel as though they were stepping into a real and distant past, not just a figment of the imagination. According to the story, Atlantis was divided into 10 kingdoms, all descended from the sea god Poseidon and a mortal woman named Plato. The god had created a perfect city for her and their children, surrounding it with rings of water and land, connected by bridges and causeways. The capital of Atlantis was like no other. Wide canals flowed through the city, feeding rich gardens and cooling courtyards shaded by flowering trees. The buildings shimmered with metals unknown to us now, gold, silver, and a mysterious alloy called orichalcum, said to glow with a warm inner light. Temples and palaces towered above the rooftops, their walls lined with precious stones, their floors paved in a delicate mosaic of beauty and precision. But despite all this glory, the soul of Atlantis began to drift. At first, the Atlanteans lived with wisdom and restraint. They honored the gods and lived in harmony with nature. But as generations passed, their virtue was replaced by vanity. Their wealth made them arrogant. Their strength led to conquest. And in their pride, they forgot the balance that had once made them great. In Plato's telling, it was at this point that the gods intervened. Angered by Atlantis' descent into corruption, they sent forth earthquakes and floods. In a single night and day, the sea rose up and swallowed the island whole. Its temples, towers, and treasures were lost to the deep, and only the memory remained, carried in silence from one age to the next. Some believe that Plato meant this as a fable, a philosophical parable meant to show how even the most magnificent civilization can fall if it turns away from balance and justice. Atlantis, in this view, was never meant to be taken literally. It was an allegory, a mirror held up to Athens, warning against the dangers of ambition unrestrained. Yet others have wondered, could there be more? Could Plato have drawn from older sources, preserving through his words the faint echo of a forgotten past? Might there once have been a great city, perhaps not called Atlantis, destroyed in some cataclysm, now lost to time? That question has lingered through centuries, inspiring explorers to sail uncharted seas, scholars to pore over ancient maps, and storytellers to imagine what might lie hidden beneath the waves. As you rest now, gently drifting between thought and dream, imagine Solon standing in the temple at Sais, hearing the priests recount their ancient tale. Imagine Plato, centuries later, sitting by a flickering oil lamp, writing those same words with care, not knowing how far they would travel, not knowing that thousands of years later you would be listening, wondering, like so many before you, whether the story is myth or memory. And as you breathe slowly and evenly, we leave behind Plato's words and step through the gates of imagination. In the next chapter, we'll walk the sunlit streets of Atlantis as they might have been, alive with beauty, music, and movement, a glimpse into a paradise on the edge of time. Before it was lost, Atlantis was said to be a world apart, a place where land, sea, and sky seemed to exist in perfect harmony. It was not merely a city, it was a vision, a dream of what human civilization could be, if only wisdom and beauty walked hand in hand. As the legend goes, Atlantis flourished beneath a temperate sun, surrounded by gentle seas, and protected by mountains that rose like ancient guardians. Its climate was mild, its rains plentiful, and its soil so rich that the land yielded crops in abundance, season after season, without need for struggle. In this paradise, the Atlanteans built their capital upon a unique design, concentric rings of land and water, shaped like ripples spreading outward from a stone dropped into a still pond. The central island held the heart of the city, the royal palace, and the great temple to Poseidon, their patron god. From this sacred center, Wide bridges reached across the watery rings to the outer districts, where markets buzzed with trade, and homes stood decorated in marble, bronze, and gold. Each ring was connected by tunnels beneath the canals, and causeways wide enough for chariots and processions. The temple to Poseidon stood tall and gleaming, said to be over a stadium in length, its outer walls plated in silver, its interior ceiling covered in ivory and adorned with emeralds and sapphires that sparkled like stars in a twilight sky. At its center rose a statue of the god himself, so large that its head brushed the roof. He stood upon a chariot drawn by 6 winged horses, surrounded by dolphins that seemed to leap from the waves of the marble floor. Pilgrims came to pay homage, bringing offerings of grain, wine, and precious stone. Beyond the temple and palace, the city was alive with movement and sound. Wide boulevards lined with flowering trees connected public squares, each filled with fountains and sculptures. Children played beneath the archways of academies. Artists worked in open-air studios, their paint glinting under the sun. Musicians strummed soft notes on strings, as merchants laid out silks, spices, and scrolls brought from distant lands. The air carried the scent of citrus and myrrh, and the salty tang of the sea never drifted far from the senses. Atlantis was not only beautiful, it was bountiful. The plains beyond the city were fed by intricate irrigation systems, engineered with care and precision. Streams and springs were channeled into aqueducts, their waters feeding orchards heavy with figs and pomegranates, olive groves that shimmered in the wind, and fields of golden barley. The Atlanteans were master farmers, skilled craftsmen, and wise governors. Their laws, according to Plato, were inscribed on a column of orichalcum, an elusive metal said to gleam like fire, and displayed within the temple for all to see. Life in Atlantis moved with order and grace. The people lived in well-built homes, with warm stone floors and shaded courtyards. Their society was divided into 10 realms, each ruled by one of Poseidon's descendants. These kings met regularly to consult one another, gathering in the temple to deliberate matters of law, trade, and defense. Though each held power, none sought to rule over the others. They were bound by ancient custom and sacred oath to govern justly and to preserve the balance of their shared world. They did not go to war for greed. They built ships not for conquest, but for trade and exploration. And when disputes arose, they turned first to counsel, not to conflict. For a time, Atlantis was not just prosperous, it was peaceful. It offered a model of civilization where knowledge and compassion stood above ambition. Plato described it as a place where the divine spark still lived in human hearts. But as in all golden ages, shadows began to gather. As wealth multiplied and generations passed, the Atlanteans began to change. Their temples grew taller, their feasts grander, their thirst for more, deeper. They expanded their reach, venturing beyond their waters to conquer and colonize. They grew proud, certain of their superiority. Slowly, the laws inscribed in the temple were read less and obeyed less still. The gods were honored in ritual, but not in heart. The balance they once cherished began to falter. And yet, in these quieter moments of our story, we pause before the fall, because there is beauty in imagining what once was, or might have been. A city where bells chimed in harmony with birdsong, where knowledge flowed like water through quiet halls, and where peace was more than a dream. Atlantis, in its prime, offers us not only a legend, but a longing, a yearning for a world in which human potential and natural wonder move together in grace. In the next chapter, we will witness the end of that dream. We will follow the final hours of Atlantis, not as an abrupt collapse, but as a slow unraveling, and then the sea will come, the tides will rise, and the city of rings will vanish, slipping into silence beneath the waves. Chapter 3. The Great Cataclysm. For a time Atlantis stood untouched, a jewel of balance and beauty, resting upon the breast of the sea. But golden ages never last forever. Like the tide that kisses the shore, even the greatest achievements must eventually ebb. And so it was with Atlantis. As generations passed, the harmony that once defined this island world began to waver. The Atlanteans, once humble stewards of wisdom and nature, slowly grew enamored with their own power. Their cities became more extravagant, their rituals more hollow. Temples once built to honor the divine became monuments to their own magnificence. They took more from the earth than they gave, and in their hearts the quiet voice of the gods became a distant echo. It was said that the divine portion in them began to fade, that their souls, once balanced between mortal and godly essence, tipped further into the realm of desire and pride. And with this shift, the Atlanteans turned their eyes outward, not in wonder, but in conquest. They began to reach across the seas with armies and ambition. Theirs was no longer a kingdom of peace, but of dominion. Plato tells us that they marched against other lands, against Egypt, against Athens itself. They believed the world owed them obedience, that they were destined to rule not just the seas, but the earth itself. But the world resisted. The Athenians, though smaller in number, rose in defense of liberty and virtue. They fought back, and they prevailed. The Atlanteans, mighty though they were pushed back to their island, their dreams of empire fractured and undone. And then the earth stirred. No army, no king, no council could prepare for what came next. It began with tremors beneath the sea, gentle at first, barely noticed in the rhythm of daily life. The waters grew restless. Animals fled the forests. The skies, once blue and clear, darkened with sudden clouds. The air thickened, heavy with silence. And then the shaking began. The land groaned. Mountains split. Great towers trembled and fell. Canals cracked open and spilled their waters in every direction. Bridges shattered like glass. Fire rose from the ground, and smoke coiled into the sky. Lightning danced across the horizon. The people of Atlantis ran, cried out, sought shelter, but there was nowhere to hide. In a single night and day of misfortune, the sea claimed the land. Waves taller than temples surged across the island. The earth buckled and sank. What had once been fields of green became the ocean floor. What had once echoed with music and laughter now fell silent beneath the deep. The palace, the temples, the great statue of Poseidon, all lost to the dark. One moment it was a civilization, the next it was a memory. There were no survivors to tell the tale, no ships that sailed away to safety. Only the story carried by priests in distant temples, preserved in the scrolls of ancient sages, passed like a whisper across centuries until it reached the ears of Plato. Some believe this cataclysm was imagined, a warning cloaked in myth, a parable wrapped in poetry. But others wonder whether such a disaster might have roots in real events. They speak of volcanoes and shifting seas, of earthquakes and eruptions that swallowed islands whole. They point to Santorini and the Thera eruption, where a Minoan civilization may have once flourished and perished in fiery ruin. Even if Atlantis never existed in stone and soil, its fall speaks to something very real: the fragility of greatness, the suddenness with which nature can reclaim what it has given, the quiet truth that nothing, no matter how grand, lasts forever. As you lie here now, still and safe, you may imagine the final hours of that world, not in terror, but in solemn awe. The trembling earth, the sweeping waves, the fading lights of a once glorious city. You may picture statues slowly tilting, disappearing beneath the ocean, gardens folding gently into the sea, scrolls and stories dissolving into silence. And yet, even in that silence, Atlantis lives on. Not in ruins, not in relics, but in memory, in the stories we tell, in the dreams we share. It is a reminder, etched not on stone tablets, but in the human heart, a story of what was or what might have been, a tale that helps us see both the beauty and the brevity of all things. In our next chapter, we'll turn our attention to the search, to the explorers, historians, and wanderers who, across centuries, have tried to find Atlantis again, not in legend, but in the real world. The question still lingers. If it was once real, where did it go? But for now, breathe. Let your thoughts drift like sea foam on quiet water. And rest in the memory of a city that once dreamed and was lost. Chapter 4. Searching the Depths. Long after the waves had stilled, after the statues were swallowed and the scrolls dissolved into silt, the world began to wonder, could it be true? Could Atlantis, this city of splendor and sorrow, have once stood upon the earth? Across centuries and continents, the search began, not with pickaxes and diving bells at first, but with quiet questions, with scrolls unfurled in candlelight, with maps compared and ancient texts translated. Scholars, sailors, mystics, and kings, each drawn to the tale not merely for treasure, but for truth. One of the earliest and most compelling theories takes us to the sun-kissed islands of the Aegean Sea. There, among the bright blues and whites of Greece, lies a crescent-shaped island called Santorini, once known as Thera. Thousands of years ago, this island was home to a flourishing civilization, the Minoans. They were skilled traders, builders, and artists. Their cities were adorned with colorful frescoes, their palaces complex and advanced, their lives seemingly peaceful. But beneath the surface of Thera lay a secret, a volcano, vast and powerful, quietly slumbered. And then, one day, it awoke. Around 1600 BCE, Thera erupted in one of the most violent volcanic events in human history. The explosion tore the island apart. Ash darkened the skies as far as Egypt. Waves swept across the Aegean. In an instant, cities were buried, ports were drowned, and an entire civilization was thrust into decline. Could this be the truth behind the myth? A once great society destroyed by natural disaster, its memory passed through generations and eventually retold by Plato? Many scholars think so. The descriptions of Atlantis, a highly advanced island, destroyed suddenly by earthquakes and floods, bear an uncanny resemblance to the fate of the Minoans. And while no single site has ever been definitively proven, Thera remains one of the most serious candidates. But the story doesn't end there. Some have looked not to the Aegean, but to the west, to Spain's southern coast, near the Doñana wetlands. Beneath layers of mud and salt marsh, satellite imagery has revealed what some believe to be circular structures, shapes eerily reminiscent of Atlantis's rings of land and sea. Archaeologists have explored the area and uncovered remnants of ancient settlements, pottery, and tools. Could these be the ghost traces of a sunken city? Further afield, eyes have turned to the Sahara Desert. In the vast emptiness of Mauritania lies a geological formation known as the Richet structure, or, more poetically, the Eye of the Sahara. From the sky, it resembles a massive set of concentric rings etched into the earth, like a forgotten fingerprint of the gods. Remote, eroded, and mysterious, the Richet has sparked fascination in recent years. Some claim it matches Plato's dimensions of Atlantis with surprising accuracy. Others caution that it is a natural formation, shaped by wind and time, not by human hands. And then there is Bimini. Off the coast of the Bahamas, divers discovered an underwater formation known as the Bimini Road, flat, rectangular stones that appear to form a deliberate path beneath the sea. To some, it's a remnant of a lost civilization. To others, a quirk of geology. The stones, shaped by nature or not, have added yet another layer of wonder to the global mystery. Some even look to Antarctica. They point to ancient maps like the Peary Race chart, which seems, mysteriously, to show the coastline of the frozen continent centuries before its official discovery. Could Atlantis lie beneath the ice, hidden beneath a shroud of snow, waiting for the warmth of another age to uncover it? There are many theories, and with each we must balance wonder with wisdom. For every grain of truth, there is a sea of speculation. For every photograph or ancient map, there is a question not yet answered. But perhaps that is part of what keeps Atlantis alive. Not the certainty, but the chase. Because in searching for Atlantis, we are searching not only for ruins, but for connection, for stories that stretch across time and language, for glimpses of our shared human past. We are drawn to the idea that something magnificent might have once existed, and that perhaps, if we look closely enough, we might find it again. Some have spent their lives combing the seafloor, scanning the earth from satellites, and piecing together clues. Others simply wonder quietly, in the moments between sleep and waking, what it must have looked like: the sunlight on the marble steps, the flags fluttering above the harbours, the smell of salt and blossom in the morning air. And so the search continues, not just in the oceans and deserts of the world, but in the quiet corridors of the mind. In our next chapter, we will look even deeper into ancient myths and parallel legends scattered across cultures that never knew one another, yet tell remarkably similar tales. Could Atlantis be one version of a story that all humanity remembers, a dream of paradise lost? For now, let the mystery rest gently in your thoughts, like silt settling at the bottom of a still, clear pool. Breathe slowly, let your body soften, and if your mind begins to drift, know that you are safe. The sea is calm, the search can wait until morning. Chapter 5. Atlantis in Ancient Lore. Long before the name Atlantis was spoken in the quiet gardens of Athens, and long before it was written in scrolls by Plato's hand, the world already whispered of places that had been lost. Stories of sunken cities, of floods sent by the heavens, of lands swallowed by the sea, appear not just in Greek philosophy, but in the oldest stories of nearly every ancient culture. These stories may not mention Atlantis by name, but they carry its echo. Let us drift now to the fertile lands of Mesopotamia, where one of the world's earliest civilizations rose between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. Here, etched into clay tablets more than 4,000 years old, we find the Epic of Gilgamesh, a tale of kings, gods, and a great flood. In this story, the gods, angered by humanity's pride and noise, unleash a deluge to wash the world clean. A man named Utnapishtim is warned in a dream. He builds a great boat, saves his family and the animals, and floats across the water for many days until the storm passes. Sound familiar? You may recall a similar story from the Hebrew Bible: Noah and his ark, the animals 2 by 2, the endless rain. Or from Hindu tradition, where Manu, the first man, is guided by a giant fish to build a boat and survive the flood that drowns the world. The Aztecs spoke of a previous age ended by water. The Chinese told of floods that reshaped the land. In Australia, the Aboriginal people passed down stories of the sea swallowing ancient coastlines. Across Polynesia, the oceans rise in chant and legend. It seems that no matter where we look, people remember a time when the waters came. Could this be coincidence? Or are these stories, scattered like stars across the night sky, all reflections of a deeper memory, an event so vast, so terrifying, that it etched itself into our collective soul? Some scholars believe that at the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, sea levels rose dramatically as glaciers melted. Entire coastlines vanished. Islands were consumed. What had once been fertile ground for villages and rituals became seabed. Those who survived passed down stories, not in charts or records, but in song, myth, and story. If this is so, then perhaps Atlantis is not just one place, but a symbol, a poetic memory of all the lands we lost to the sea, a name for a truth our ancestors could feel, even if they couldn't explain it, a truth wrapped in metaphor, drifting through centuries. In Egypt, where the priest told Solon the story of Atlantis, there were already stories of ancient floods, of kingdoms brought low by rising waters. The Nile, both giver and taker of life, was central to Egyptian belief. When it rose, it gave abundance. When it surged, it took everything away. The rhythm of flood and retreat shaped the people's understanding of the divine. It is easy to imagine how memories of sudden devastation might find their way into sacred texts and temple walls. The Greeks themselves had more than one story of a lost world. The city of Helike, once a thriving port in ancient Achaea, sank beneath the sea after an earthquake in 373 BCE during Plato's own lifetime. Fishermen later claimed to see ruins beneath the waves, columns and walls shimmering through the clear water. Perhaps Plato, already fascinated by tales of cataclysm and divine punishment, saw in Helike a confirmation of what he had written, or even a warning to his own people. The deeper we look, the more we find that Atlantis lives not in isolation, but in a constellation of myths, a pattern seen not just in one culture, but many. It is as though humanity has always carried this memory within us, a longing for a golden place we left behind or lost, a time when the world was still balanced, when we lived closer to the divine. Perhaps that's why Atlantis continues to draw us in. It is not just the ruins or the mystery, but the feeling, the aching familiarity of a story we've always known, even if we've never heard it told quite this way. And so, as you listen now, your breath slow, your body heavy with rest, imagine those ancient storytellers. Picture them sitting beneath starlit skies, beside fires or riverbanks, telling tales to children with wide eyes and elders who had heard the same words as children themselves. Imagine how their voices rose and softened, how the words flowed like the rivers they feared might rise again. Atlantis, then, is not just a city. It is a chorus, a memory that lives across oceans and time zones, across languages and lineages. It is the shadow of paradise in our collective dreamscape. In our next chapter, we will explore how that dream was reshaped in the modern world, how thinkers and mystics, writers and warriors took the story of Atlantis and twisted it to suit new desires. From Renaissance maps to Nazi occultism, the myth took on strange and unexpected forms, but for now, let your thoughts settle like dust on ancient stone. Let the stories of the flood rest gently in your mind. And as the sea of sleep rises to meet you, know that you are floating among the oldest memories of humankind. Chapter 6. From Myth to Obsession. As the centuries passed, the story of Atlantis did not fade. It drifted slowly through time, sometimes quiet, sometimes bold, changing shape as stories often do. What began as a parable in a philosopher's dialogue became something more, a mirror held up to every generation, reflecting its hopes, its fears, and its need for wonder. During the Middle Ages, when much of Plato's work was hidden in forgotten libraries, The tale of Atlantis slept. But as Europe awoke to the Renaissance and rediscovered the wisdom of the ancients, new eyes fell upon the lost city beneath the sea. Scholars, artists, and explorers read Plato's words and saw not just allegory, but possibility. The age of exploration had begun, and with it came dreams of uncharted lands. Maps were redrawn, horizons were stretched, and people began to wonder, if Atlantis lay beyond the known world, could it have been one of the lands now newly found? Was it the Americas, an island in the Atlantic, perhaps even something yet undiscovered, still sleeping beneath the ocean? Some cartographers went so far as to include Atlantis on their maps, sketched as a great island in the Western Sea. Others wrote of it as a real place, lost in a past older than recorded time. The myth was no longer just about moral decay or divine punishment. It had become a quest. In the 17th century, a man named Francis Bacon reimagined Atlantis in his book New Atlantis, a utopian tale of a scientific paradise. In Bacon's vision, Atlantis was not lost, but hidden, a place where knowledge flourished in harmony with faith and wisdom. It was a dream of what civilization might yet become, rather than a warning of what it had already lost. But not all visions of Atlantis were so gentle. In the 19th century, with archaeology still in its infancy and colonialism in full force, the myth of Atlantis was claimed by many for many reasons. Theosophists, mystics, and spiritualists began to write of Atlantis as a cradle of humanity, a place where ancient beings wielded forgotten powers and lived in harmony with the universe. Madame Blavatsky, founder of the Theosophical Society, wrote of Atlanteans as a root race, gifted with psychic abilities and divine knowledge. To those drawn to mysticism and metaphysical ideas, Atlantis was not just real, it was sacred, a place of origin, a forgotten home. And in this form, the story began to grow stranger, stretching far beyond Plato's quiet tale into realms of prophecy, reincarnation, and lost technologies. But perhaps the most troubling transformation came in the 20th century, when the story was twisted into something darker. The Nazis, obsessed with race and ancient origins, looked to Atlantis not for wisdom, but for validation. They believed, or at least pretended to believe, that the lost city had been home to a superior people, the ancestors of what they called the Aryan race. This false narrative was used to justify horrific ideologies and actions, casting a shadow over the myth that still lingers today. It is a sobering reminder of how stories, even those born in philosophy and wonder, can be reshaped by the needs of those who tell them. Atlantis became a blank canvas, painted over again and again, each time in the colors of the age. And yet, through all this, the heart of the story endures. Beneath the distortions, beneath the inventions and agendas, there is still something quiet and aching in the myth of Atlantis. A memory of balance, a warning about pride, a longing for a place that might have been, and might still be, somewhere beyond the reach of ships. Perhaps that is why we return to it, not for certainty, but for the comfort of wondering, for the soft possibility that something beautiful once existed and was lost, not in fire, not in war, but in water, something that slips silently beneath the waves, too perfect to last. As you rest now, let those thoughts flow gently through your mind. Imagine how the myth moved from scroll to whisper, from book to map, from dream to obsession. Each new age finding in it something of itself. In our next chapter, we'll step into the modern era, where Atlantis appears not in temples or philosophy, but in films, fiction, and digital screens. A myth reborn once more, not as a warning or a parable, but as a story that belongs to everyone. For now, breathe. let the tide of thought retreat. You are drifting, slowly, safely, between myth and memory. Chapter 7. Atlantis in the Modern Mind. Even now, thousands of years after Plato first set ink to parchment, the myth of Atlantis lives on, not only in books of philosophy or the journals of explorers, but in places far closer to our everyday lives. In glowing cinema screens, in video games and bedtime stories, in crystal shops and internet forums, the lost city continues to rise and fall over and over again within the imagination. In the last 100 years, Atlantis has become more than myth. It has become icon. In the world of fiction, the tale has taken on countless new lives. Writers have turned Atlantis into everything from a sunken empire of warrior kings to a haven of ancient technology, hidden just beyond our reach. In comic books, it is the kingdom of Aquaman. In animated films, it is a place of light, floating stones, and mysterious energy. In novels, it is often rediscovered by a daring archaeologist, or visited by a curious child in a dream. Each version is different. Each one reinterprets the core of the myth, the idea that something once great was lost, but might yet be found. Atlantis has become a setting, a symbol, a shorthand for wonder. For some, it represents an ancient advanced civilization, a race of beings far older and wiser than we imagine ourselves to be. For others, it is a metaphor for lost knowledge or lost innocence, a place untouched by modernity where harmony once ruled. In New Age communities, Atlantis holds a special place. It is believed by some to have been a spiritual center, a source of cosmic wisdom, where humans lived in tune with higher vibrations and divine laws. Healers and mystics speak of past lives lived in Atlantis. They wear crystals said to carry its energy. They meditate on its name like a mantra, soft, ancient, resonant. And even outside those circles, the word Atlantis evokes something deeper than fantasy. It speaks to the quiet, human yearning for paradise, for a world before the world we know, a cleaner one, a wiser one, a world not ruined, but simply misplaced. In schools and documentaries, the story of Atlantis is explored with curiosity and caution. Scholars discuss Plato's intentions, archaeological sites are examined with care, and questions are asked, not to chase the impossible, but to understand the possible. What does our fascination with Atlantis say about us? What does it mean that we continue to imagine, search, and hope? Perhaps it is because Atlantis is more than just a legend. It is a kind of mirror. When we tell the story, we are often telling it about ourselves, about what we wish we could be, about what we fear we might become. We dream of Atlantis because it invites us to imagine a world where knowledge and kindness flourished. We grieve for Atlantis because we know deep down how easily such things can be lost. And so, in the quiet corners of libraries and the deep wells of the internet, in children's imaginations and scholarly debates, the lost city endures. It is the place we long for when we speak of utopia. It is the shadow that follows every tale of ruin. It is the name we give to the golden moment just before the fall, and maybe that's why, even as we learn more, even as we grow older and wiser, we still return to it, again and again. Not for answers, but for the comfort of the question, for the gentle reminder that even in the deepest parts of the ocean, even in the quietest places of the mind, there are stories still waiting to be found. As you lie here now, with the world hushed around you, let your thoughts ripple outward. Let them drift through the ruins of temples, past stone columns and sleeping gardens. Let the gentle waters carry you through the myths we make and the truths they sometimes reveal. In our final chapter, we'll pause to reflect, not on whether Atlantis was real, but on what it means that we still believe in it, not just with our minds, but with something older, something deeper. But for now, breathe softly. You are safe. You are floating in story, and the city is not so far away. Chapter 8. Final Reflections. So now the waves have quieted. The story has been told. We have walked the golden halls of Atlantis. We have listened to Plato's voice, echoing from ages past. We have watched the rise of a utopia, felt the sorrow of its fall, and followed the search through oceans, deserts, myths, and minds. And now, as we draw near the end, we are left with something softer, not a conclusion, but a quiet knowing. Atlantis may never be found on any map. Perhaps it never was, or perhaps it was once real, long ago buried by time and tide. But in the end, whether it existed in the world or only in the mind, its meaning endures. Because Atlantis is not just a city, it is an idea, a reflection, a memory carried in the bones of stories told around fires, whispered across cultures that never met, remembered even when forgotten. It is a dream of balance, a warning against excess, and a reminder that nothing, no matter how great, lasts forever. But there is beauty in that. There is grace in impermanence. Atlantis teaches us to wonder, to ask questions, to imagine the world not only as it is, but as it could be, more peaceful, more harmonious, more wise. It shows us what happens when we forget our place in nature, but also what might happen if we remember, and maybe, just maybe, it gives us permission to dream, to believe in lost worlds and quiet miracles, to find comfort in stories that wrap around us like the sea itself, gentle, endless, and full of mystery. As you lie here now, still and soft, you may feel the edges of sleep drawing near. Let them come. Let them pull you gently down, like the slow tide retreating from the shore. The story is ending, but your dream is just beginning. You are safe. You are warm. You are drifting through time, through memory, through the space between truth and myth. Atlantis may be gone, but in this moment it lives in you, not as a place, but as peace. Good night, traveller. May your dreams be gentle, and your oceans calm, and may you wake with the wonder still with you.